Some places are just dark, not just in the way that shadows gather in corners, but in a way that feels almost alive, like the walls themselves are holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. They hold on to energy, a stain that never washes out. The past lingers, seeping into every crack and crevice, leaving behind a residue that can't be scrubbed away. You walk into a room and the air gets heavy, the temperature drops, and suddenly you feel like you're not alone, even if you know you are. The hairs on your arms stand up, your skin prickles, and your instincts scream that something is wrong. It's a primal warning. Get out. Your body knows before your mind does that you're somewhere you shouldn't be. For most, that feeling is fleeting. It passes as quickly as it comes, dismissed as imagination or nerves. But for some, it becomes their reality. The darkness doesn't leave, it settles in, making itself at home. This is the story of one of those places, and one of those people. A story where the line between the living and the dead blurs, and the ordinary becomes terrifying. Imagine a small, unassuming house on a quiet street in 1974 Culver City, California. A place that looked like any other, but hid secrets behind its doors. On Periwinkle Street, a darkness was about to awaken. Something old, something hungry, something that had been waiting for the right moment. This wasn't a place with a bloody history. No infamous crimes, no legends whispered by neighbors. It was just a house. But something was waiting there, hidden in the silence, ready to make itself known. This is the story of Doris Bither and her family, a case that became one of the most terrifying and well-documented paranormal events in history. Their lives would be changed forever by what they encountered. It challenges what we think we know about the spirit world. The Bither case forced even skeptics to reconsider what might be possible. The events that unfolded in that house are not for the faint of heart. They are chilling, disturbing, and impossible to forget. This isn't just a tale of things that go bump in the night. It's about the real fear that seeps into your bones and refuses to let go. It's a chronicle of a family under siege by forces they could not see or understand. Their home became a battleground between the known and the unknown. The terror was relentless, escalating from strange noises to full-blown physical assaults. No one was safe and no one could explain what was happening. We are going to step into those shadows. We'll follow the footsteps of those who lived through the nightmare and try to understand what they faced. Sometimes, what we find in the paranormal is not comforting. Sometimes, it's a reminder of how little we truly know. The case of Doris Bither is a stark reminder. When you stare into the abyss stares back, and sometimes it reaches out. This is a journey into a real-life horror story where human suffering and supernatural phenomena collided. The scars left behind are still felt today. Prepare yourself, because we are about to unlock the door to the entity haunting. What waits on the other side may change the way you see the world forever. To truly understand the haunting that would come to define this story, you first have to understand the woman at its center. A woman whose life was shaped by shadows long before any ghost appeared. Doris Bither was no stranger to hardship. Her life was marked by poverty, instability, and trauma, all of which left deep scars. Even before she set foot on Periwinkle Street, Doris had already endured more than most people could imagine. She was a single mother, raising 4 children on her own in a world that offered little support. The weight of responsibility was immense, and everyone has a breaking point. Doris was no exception. Some believe that spirits are drawn to emotional energy, especially the kind that lingers after years of pain and loss. Doris had a lifetime of it, and her struggles seemed to radiate from her like a beacon. In August 1974, the Bither family moved into 11,547 Periwinkle Street hoping for a fresh start. The house itself was unremarkable, just another modest home in a sprawling Los Angeles suburb. But sometimes the most ordinary places hide the darkest secrets. From the very beginning, something felt off. The air inside was heavy, almost suffocating, and there was a constant sense of being watched. An invisible presence lurking just out of sight. The children noticed it first. Kids are often more sensitive to things adults dismiss. Doris's youngest son, Brian, began complaining about a presence in his room. describing an old woman who watched him from the shadows of his closet. Her other children soon reported hearing strange noises at night and feeling sudden, inexplicable cold spots that seemed to move through the house. At first, Doris, overwhelmed by her own struggles, dismissed their fears as childish imagination. But as the days passed, she found herself unable to ignore her own growing sense of dread. Many would later use her alcoholism to discredit her story, suggesting her mind was playing tricks. But her children saw the same things, and soon, even neighbors would witness events they couldn't explain or rationalize. Doris's personal struggles didn't invalidate her experience. If anything, they may have made her more vulnerable. The entity in that house seemed to feed on chaos, fear, and the emotional turmoil that filled the Bither home. In the Bither household, there was plenty of both. The stage was set for a haunting that would soon escalate beyond anyone's worst nightmares, leaving scars that would last a lifetime. The haunting began subtly, as they so often do. It was the kind of unease that crept in quietly, almost unnoticed at first, like a chill draft slipping through a cracked window. Flickering lights, slamming doors, easy to explain away at first. The family blamed faulty wiring, old hinges, or the wind rattling the windows. But the disturbances were persistent, always at the same time, always in the same way. The clock would stop, shadows would stretch across the walls, and the air would grow heavy. The house developed a rhythm of strange occurrences, growing more frequent and unnerving. Each night the sense of dread deepened, as if the house itself was waiting for something. Soon, the family heard disembodied whispers, faint at first, but angry. The voices seemed to argue, sometimes pleading, sometimes threatening. The whispers came from empty corners, behind closed doors, from the very walls. They echoed through the house, impossible to trace, impossible to silence. Doris and her children would freeze, trying to locate the source, but there was never one. The voices seemed to move, slipping away just as they drew near. The house itself seemed to be speaking, murmuring threats they couldn't quite understand. It was as if the walls had secrets and they were desperate to be heard. Then came the smells, foul odors of decay or a cloying perfume that vanished as quickly as it appeared. Sometimes the stench was so strong it made their eyes water, other times it was gone in an instant, leaving only confusion behind. The house was no longer a sanctuary, it was a prison. Every room felt hostile, every hallway a gauntlet. Every sense was under attack, keeping them perpetually on edge. Sleep became impossible and fear seeped into every waking moment. The physical manifestations grew bolder, cabinets flying open, objects levitating and crashing to the floor. Plates shattered, books hurled themselves from shelves, and nothing stayed where it belonged. The poltergeist activity was escalating at an alarming rate. It was as if the entity was feeding on their fear, growing stronger with every terrified gasp. This was no longer something they could ignore or rationalize. The evidence was everywhere, undeniable and terrifying. The family was living in a constant state of fear, trapped with an unseen force growing stronger and more aggressive. Every day brought new horrors, and every night was worse than the last. The whispers in the walls were becoming a roar. The house trembled with energy, as if on the verge of something catastrophic. The family knew they were in serious danger. They could feel the threat closing in, suffocating and relentless. Their home was under siege. The world outside seemed distant, unreachable, as if the house itself had cut them off from help. The haunting was no longer subtle, it was war, and the family was losing ground with every passing night. The subtle haunting was terrifying enough, but it was only the beginning. The unseen presence began to take form, fleeting shadows, darting across doorways, looming in corners. These shadow figures were a constant reminder. They were not alone. As weeks turned to months, the apparitions grew more defined. Doris saw the torso of a man, hazy and translucent, drifting through rooms. The children saw figures too, an old woman in the closet, dark shapes standing over their beds. The barrier between worlds was thinning. The most terrifying were three distinct entities. Doris claimed they were the spirits of three men. Two were smaller, but the third was dominant, a large, powerful shadow with a solid shape. This figure directed the activity, bringing an overwhelming sense of dread. The appearance of these figures marked a terrifying escalation. The haunting was now about direct confrontation. The family could see the shapes of their tormentors. Any lingering doubt was gone. They were not imagining things. Their home had been invaded by hostile, non-human entities. The fear of what these beings might do next was suffocating. The shadows had come out to play, and the game was turning deadly. The terror crossed a horrifying line when the paranormal activity turned violent. The entities began to physically attack Doris, slapping, pushing, leaving bruises and welts. These attacks often happened at night, when she was most vulnerable. The room would grow unnaturally cold before the violence began. The assaults escalated into something far more sinister. Doris claimed she was repeatedly and violently sexually assaulted by the dominant entity. Her children sometimes witnessed these horrific events, awakened by their mother's screams. They saw her being thrown around the bed, contorting as if wrestling with an unseen attacker. The trauma inflicted on her children was unimaginable. They were helpless, forced to watch their mother be brutalized by a force they could not see or fight. The psychological toll was immense. The children often slept together for a sense of safety that never truly came. The house was no longer a home, it was a place of torture. Doris's eldest son tried to intervene, swinging wildly at empty air. The frustration and helplessness haunted him for life. The entities were systematically terrorizing and traumatizing the entire family, feeding on their fear and despair. Desperate and terrified, Doris Bither reached out for help. She called the police, hoping for protection or explanation. Officers arrived to chaos and a distraught woman telling a wild tale of ghosts and invisible attackers. They found no evidence of a human intruder and left. Her pleas for help were met with skepticism and dismissal. Doctors and mental health professionals interpreted her stories as psychological distress. As a single mother in poverty, her credibility was questioned at every turn. This isolation only deepened her despair. The entities were real to her and her children, but to the outside world, she was an unreliable narrator. The skepticism pushed her further into a corner, leaving her with nowhere to turn. Her terror was compounded by profound loneliness. Not only did Doris endure nightly torment, but she also faced judgment and dismissal from those meant to protect her. She was fighting a battle on two fronts, against supernatural forces and against a world that refused to acknowledge her reality. She and her children were utterly alone in their struggle. Her desperation was reaching a breaking